everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Quality Experts Share Keys to Medical Device Design Control, brought to you by Medical Design and Outsourcing Magazine and Arena Solutions. We would like to thank our presenters, Ann McGuire, Manager of Product Marketing at Arena Solutions, Christopher Hill, Director of Quality Assurance at Organ Recovery Systems, and Biz Ayer, Senior Director of Quality at Nevro, for being here today. I'm Danielle Kirsch, Associate Editor, filling in for Nancy Crotty, and I'll be your moderator for today. Just a couple of housekeeping details before we get started. You will see several boxes on your desktop, all of which can be moved around to suit your preferences. You can enter your questions in the Q&A box, and they will be addressed after the presentation. Another box to note is the additional resources box. This box has websites and other information on this subject. And without further ado, I will hand the presentation over.
Well, thank you, Danielle. Welcome to Medical Device Design Control's Quality Experts Share Keys to Success. Here is our plan for the next hour or so. I will start with talking about the importance of design controls, then briefly overview the elements of design controls. Next, Chris and Vis will share lessons learned, best practices, and solutions for addressing design controls challenges. Finally, we'll answer your questions. Let's look at why we are focusing on design controls today. First, design controls encompass good design and engineering practices that yield consistently high-quality products. Second, for medical device companies like most of you, formal design controls are mandated, so it's about avoiding FDA inspection observations. Looking at the inspection results from 2018, issues with the quality system, everything covered under 21 CFR 820, accounts for almost 90% of the 483s issued. I notice that this percentage has remained consistent over the last few years. Within those quality system findings, you can see in this pie chart that about 14% are design controls related. On the other side of the pie chart, you can also see that CAPA processes are cited at about the same rate. Maybe that will be another webinar. Let us know if you're interested. To put a finer point on this, think about the impact of these 483s, which is the FDA's lowest escalation level when they do find an issue. Each 483 is published on the FDA website, so the impact can be wide. Physicians, patients, investors, even employees could lose confidence in your ability to execute. Competitors may see it as a weakness to exploit. And internally, management needs to reallocate their time away from established priorities and toward resolving the issues identified by the inspectors. Having a solid design control foundation could prevent the expense and unwanted attention of a 483, but also a warning letter or even a device recall. Let's overview briefly the elements of design controls. Design controls start at the beginning of the product concept stage through to production and ongoing improvements, the complete product development cycle. Planning is the first element in the design control process. The plan, like all plans, include the activities, dates, and responsible people. You update the plan document as your plans evolve. Design input comes from users, patients and physicians, as well as other stakeholders. The design process results in design output, documentation that describes the product. Design reviews are throughout design development to check the design results and to identify issues. Verification means making sure that the design outputs completely and unambiguously match the design inputs. In verification, you should be able to answer questions like, do we have all the documentation we need? Who's approved it and when? What's missing? Design transfer is the process of providing manufacturing with the information they need. Design transfer is worth noting today, even if it's not as frequently cited in the 483s, because in our experience, we so often meet companies where the transfer of information from engineering to operations is manual, risking delays and errors. The process usually involves fixing a bill of material that's stored in a spreadsheet, removing columns, maybe reformatting numbers, exporting a CSV, then uploading it into the ERP system. Next, manufacturing builds the medical device using design output, and that would be the bill of material, drawings, assembly instructions. The next step then is validation to make sure that the product as built will function to meet the user needs. All these tests and results must be documented. Validation is the most commonly referenced subpart of the Design Controls 483s. Design changes are the second most cited issue under design controls. After that first revision, updating ERP and other downstream systems can become tricky. What has changed? What parts were added or removed? Is all the supporting documentation updated? You can run into trouble here. And change processes can have many variables. So we've seen people stumble over documenting this process and then following it. Finally, the design history file is the compilation of your design documentation and its changes over time. This is another administration-heavy element that can be cumbersome. The resulting file, too, can be hard to search and use. A QMS system can simplify these processes and others related to compliant quality practices. A product-centric QMS system leverages a single system of record to manage the product and related quality processes. It manages the product bill of material, drawings, specs, the AML, and changes. The quality processes are in the same system. So, for example, CAPAs can be linked to ECOs when it makes sense. And complaints can link with subassemblies that are causing the problem. Today, our experts will discuss how using a product-centric QMS dramatically improves design transfer and design change processes, as well as quality processes. Now that we've set the table on the importance of design controls, let's get some insight from our two quality veterans. Chris and Vis, thank you for joining us today. You both have extensive backgrounds in quality and compliance for medical device companies and surely realize the importance of design controls. I was hoping you could share a little bit about a lesson learned from your career where design controls had a major impact on your validation, product launch, or production. Chris, let's start with you.
Sure. But before we talk about the challenges, I did want to reiterate one point from what Ann described. The FDA design controls are required, and it's something that we all have to comply with. But it's also good business practice in planning your project, identifying data sources, deliverables, responsibilities, and risks. Those are all good steps for any product launch, whether it's a regulated device or not. So we don't just follow the best practices because we want to avoid the 483s. We follow them because we want our final products to be well-designed, well-controlled, and well-documented. So to answer your question, my biggest challenge when I first joined Organ Recovery Systems was really collecting and organizing all the historic design documentation and putting them into some kind of logical and sustainable format. And that was a several-year project and really is still in process to some extent. Our documentation was spread across paper copies and binders, electronic files on the network, files stored only at our contract manufacturing sites. We're a pretty small company, so we needed an efficient way to centralize everything and then keep it current. To do that, we created the electronic device history file that linked all of the required files, whether it was scanned or native, in electronic format. And since all the documents are now controlled electronically, our design history file always contains the correct version of every document with minimal upkeep.
Wow, several years to organize all those binders and electronic files? That is a big challenge and certainly a big expense, especially for a small company. Vis, what lesson would you like to share?
Sure, Ann. So when I joined Nevro about 8 years ago, I realized that we outsource all of our design and development activities. So you can imagine that working for a Class A active implantable company, you have a lot of documents with related design and development. So we used to have these documents shared through emails and FTP sites for review and approval. And internally, we used to have a paper-based change control process and we built DHS using binders. So when we want these binders to be ready for audit purposes or for internal review, it was really time-consuming. Now what we have done is, over the last few years, we have grown. So we are implementing an electronic system to manage our change control process in DHS. So working with outsourced partners, we let them know what our different phases of our design control are and what our requirements are. So in the past, when we used a paper-based change control process, when it comes to when and how it needs to happen, the processes are kind of open and not defined.
Yes, we hear over and over that building, maintaining, and making the paper or electronic paper hybrid DHF audit ready is a huge administrative burden. Adding international markets like I know you have and more products only expands the workload. Let's do a quick audience poll. This will be the only one today. We want to get a feel for who's in the audience today so we can better focus our discussion. Please complete this quick poll. How do you manage design controls today? Do you have no design control processes yet? Are you using a paper system? Have you put together a combination of spreadsheets, shared drives, and email for a homegrown system? Have you purchased a commercial system like document management, PLM, or QMS? Or are you not sure? Select your current situation and submit. You'll see the results on the next slide in, let's say, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see. Okay, interesting. Well, it looks like most of you have either a homegrown electronic system or have invested in a commercial electronic system. I see some people have no design control processes yet. Well, I'm guessing that the situations, especially with the homegrown system, that the situations that our experts have talked about so far resonate with you. Well, rest assured, there is a better way. Let's get back to our experts. Okay. Like we talked about in the introduction, accurately performing and documenting design controls is a crucial aspect of meeting 21 CFR Part 820.30 compliance for most medical device companies. And design controls covers a lot of territory in terms of teams, data, and processes over the life of the product. The poll results show that a few members are using don't have any processes yet. Can you talk about the biggest challenges and how using a product-centric QMS system helps? Let's hear from this first.
Sure. Like I mentioned before, as a manufacturer of Class 3 active wearable medical device, our device consists of software, hardware, and mechanical components. So from a design control perspective, you want to make sure that you ensure not just the individual components are working. When they integrate, it all performs as intended. So planning is key. At the beginning of the project, you want to ensure all requirements, including if it's a Class 3, there are essential performance requirements are captured. And if you're outsourcing, you want to make sure the roles and responsibilities between you and the outsourcing partners are clearly laid out. And if the outsourcing partners are really doing all of your design and development activities, you want to make sure they're qualified and approved. If it is a big project, you can imagine working with an outsourced partner managing the changes, review, or approving documents is a huge and significant effort. So here's where the electronic system is going to make it effortless. So having an electronic system makes the change control process very seamless. You can track changes, revision to the document. You can review and approve document using the built-in change control process. In addition, you can even build your DHS using the electronic system. So this way, it ensures that the DHS is current and all your project documents are linked appropriately.
Yes, good point, Sis. Managing a complex product, which is what we call a product with electronic, mechanical, and software parts, is far easier with a product-centric QMS system. So are planning and revising the plans, requirements management, vendor management, and product change management. And all are crucial in realizing an implantable Class 3 product, especially using an outsourced manufacturing model. Chris, what do you see as the biggest challenge, and how is product-centric QMS helping?
All right. Well, we don't have an implantable Class 3 product, but we do cover electronic, mechanical, software, and chemical as well in our products. But the QMS system has definitely been helpful when we cross-reference the source documents. A single document may capture data that satisfies multiple requirements. For instance, a risk analysis is an output of the design control process, and it's linked to the design history file, but it's also a component of our risk management file and a component of the usability and human factors engineering file. So instead of maintaining 3 separate binders with paper copies outside of the document control system, we've been able to link individual electronic documents to multiple locations, and that way we're covering the different standards. Plus, as I mentioned before, the electronic documents are linked, so they're always current, and having a QMS system makes this far easier to maintain and more effective when I present this at audits.
Well, this echoes with my experience when first meeting with medical device companies. I wondered why there were so many filing cabinets and shelves of binders, even for small single product companies. Then I realized that much of it was duplicates being stored in different binders and folders that must be kept in sync. I knew it could be simplified. Now let's talk about maintaining design controls with design and manufacturing partners. Many medical device companies outsource their manufacturing, which can add complexity when managing information for compliance. You mentioned at the beginning of this discussion that the biggest impact of design controls for you was related to working with your supply chain partners. Can you briefly describe your environment and how you are able to maintain proper design controls at your company?
Sure, Anne. So as I had mentioned before, we outsource everything from all of our design development activities to all of our manufacturing. We don't do any manufacturing in-house. So for us, planning is the key. At the planning phase, we define who's doing what. You want to ensure your required deliverables are clearly laid out. And when you do your design input or your user needs, you call out what you're planning to build. And so that when you're going through your design output process, it's very clear. So when you get ready for building units at your contract manufacturer for design verification testing, you want to ensure that the units are built using the correct bill of materials. This is where the electronic systems, with PLM capabilities really help you achieve that. One of the challenges we used to have was we managed them through Excel files. Tracking changes were difficult. I can see from the poll that there are quite a few users who are using, Excel and Word, and I assume they have similar experience to what I used to have. The changes are noted using comments, and we ended up creating duplicate parts. And if you want to know if a part is used across different product lines, we had to open each of the BOM files to find out where the part was used.
What? So you had to, if you had an issue with a component, you had to open each BOM spreadsheet to find out where the component was used?
Yeah, so you can imagine how much time it took, and and you weren't even sure, did we find everything? There is a potential to miss one too. But now, just to take it further, now we start using the electronic systems to build and manage bill of materials. The parts are linked across product lines. There are options called where used, so you can just type the part number and it tells you which product lines it's being used at. If a part is changed, you can manage the disposition of the inventory pretty easily. We are even taking one step further now, trying to implement something called supplier access. So when a part is changed, our current process is we notify our suppliers through email, and what we want to do is we want the system to send an email to our supplier so the suppliers or our outsourcing partners can log into the system and see what got changed, and they can even complete the inventory disposition side of when that change will become effective, how many components, old components they have, did they use it or did they scrap it, all those things, instead of relying all this on an email.
Similar to what Vis is describing, we also outsource nearly everything at Organ Recovery Systems. A few years back, we had an FDA 483 associated with our device master record and the control of our subcontracted manufacturers. They argued that our device master record must contain the current device history record or the batch record, and up until then, our contract manufacturers had controlled them. Now, we were involved in any major changes that had potential to impact compliance, but we didn't approve every change to documents, and we didn't have copies of the most recent version. So, as our corrective action, we had to revise the quality agreements with the contract manufacturers so that we approved every change to our product-specific manufacturing documents. And then once we were in the approval routing, we were able to keep those current copies of the device history record electronically linked in our device master record. So now, as part of lot release, we can check the contract manufacturer's device history record revision against what we control in our system to make sure that we're using the current approved instructions or that they were using them. The FDA did come in. They approved of the solution and closed out the observation, so it did have a happy ending.
Well, that's good news. Based on what you're both saying, it's apparent that a product-centric QMS system supports the outsourced business model by helping with communication and collaboration. Let's talk about the challenges with risk management, which ensures that the product works as intended and does no harm. Risk management is a fact of all product development, and particularly in the regulated medical device world. How have you seen the way you approach design controls as helping risk management efforts? Chris, let's start with you this time.
All right. Well, with the release of ISO 13485, the 2016 version, risk management is now pretty much a part of all processes in the quality system, including design control. So when changes to a design are proposed, we should be assessing the risk as part of the review process. So at Organ Recovery Systems, our change management process requires a review of the risk management file, or the RMF, as part of any changes to the device design, labeling, or manufacturing processes. Now, the RMF contains separate risk analysis documents covering the design, the manufacturing process, cybersecurity, user application. We have a different FMEA-style document for each one of those. The documents are all linked in the system, though, to make it easy for the engineer who's proposing the change to open up the applicable risk analysis and then decide if that design change will introduce a new risk or will mitigate an existing risk. Then, if the risk analysis, the FMEA, needs to be updated as a result of the design change, we can update that document and add it to the same change order as the design change so it all goes through together.
Great. Vis, what has been your experience with risk management?
Sure, Anne. I mean, it's very similar to what Chris was explaining, right? I mean, you can hear from Chris, take that, risk management plays a very important role. It's key. It's a key process in the whole design control process. So, it's a key. It's very important to make sure that all of your risks are identified early and it's incorporated while you're designing your product. So the key is when you're developing your user needs and design inputs, you understand what the risk is going to be. This will help in achieving a good design output, i.e. When you design a product, when you test a product, you know for sure that you address all the risk, you identified all the risk, and the product is working as intended.
Great. Well, for both of you, using a product-centric QMS system, your risk management files, sounds like your risk management files are controlled, accessible, and linked into the design process throughout the product development cycle.
true statement.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've heard a lot of good information today. Before we end our discussion, let's ask our experts for final advice on successful design controls. Some of our audience members are just beginning their medical device development journey, while some are struggling with their current processes and systems. Based on your extensive experience in the medical device industry, what advice or tips would you suggest as keys to successful compliant design controls? Chris?
Sure. Our QMS is based around the bill of material, as you described, and all the other subsystems, including change control, can be linked to the products. Our electronic design history files were created first, and then we added the electronic device master records and risk management files. A few years later, the usability and human factor engineering files, and we've implemented online workflows for the complaint investigations, nonconformances, CAPA, audit observations. So if I could do it all over, and if I could see the future, I would have mapped out all of those different processes in advance and how they were going to interact. Now, organic growth can sometimes be very good, but I would have loved to have had a documented overall strategy of everything I was going to do with the software before I started. It would have saved me a lot of time going back and forth and tweaking processes and workflows to get everything connected right.
What advice do you have for our audience, Vis?
Sure. Understand what you're developing. When I say developing, is the user needs. You want to make sure that user needs are clear, not vague. The requirements are thorough, and you can meet it. Incorporate risk management activities early in the development process. When you're doing the design input, make sure the user needs and requirements are clearly defined. So this way, when the design outputs are, when you're reaching the design output stage, you can successfully meet it. And also, in order to achieve all this, doing the design review at the end of each phase is very important. If you are doing a large and complex project, it's okay to have multiple design reviews. This will enable the project team and the stakeholders enough information, and you can identify time and resources, and also the stakeholders can assess the progress of the development of the project, and which will also ensure that the critical risks are identified and addressed. Understand the difference between design verification and validation. And last but not the least, make sure you have a good change control process, which is key to successful design control.
Well, thank you both for sharing your keys to success with managing design controls. I am going to pass the mic over to Danielle to kick off our Q&A.
Thank you,
Danielle?
Ann. As Ann said, we are open for questions now. Feel free to send your questions in the Q&A box on your screen. We do have a couple of questions here. The first one is, many of our CATAs include a PCN. Is there a way to link these two processes for audits, and how are product changes managed?
Okay, a PCN, so I think a product change notification. We use the terminology ECO, or engineering change order, but I think it's all the same. And linking them, it's pretty easy in our system. We can link document updates, change orders, investigations, or any external documents. For CAPA in particular, it's pretty handy to have the change order linked to the CAPA so that you can check the status or access content from within the CAPA when you're conducting effectiveness verifications. But yeah, it's all linked in our system for all changes.
Same here. We use quality module. We use a system called Arena. We use quantity module. We have CAPA with that process. We can upload multiple documents. We can use different phases within the CAPA, and we can approve each phases.
Okay. Another question. How do you handle complaints or investigations with the system?
For organ recovery systems, the complaints or the initial customer call is actually received in an external system, and then we document the investigation in our QMS. And we've got a custom workflow that we built. We capture the critical data in the workflow, summarize the investigation, the root cause, the corrective actions, and then we upload a PDF of the full investigation report as a reference. So complaints can be linked directly to the product, just like we do for a CAPA or a nonconformance. And that way we can pull a list of all the complaints or CAPAs or nonconformances from the system for any given product.
Okay, and have you experienced an audit, and how do auditors like your system?
Sure, I'll take it. So this is it. Yeah, so we recently had our internal audit, and we shared our electronic DHS within the system, and the auditor liked it. They were able to see how the documents are linked, when it was completed, which phase it was linked to. They liked the whole solution.
Yeah, we've also presented ours. In the last 2 years, we've had FDA, ISO, and customer audits, and we've shown them the design history files, the risk management files, the device master records, live on screen during the audit. And they were all very impressed. They were happy with it.
Chris, this question about audits got me thinking about something that I hear a lot from medical device companies. I've heard that preparing for an audit is a lot easier with Arena. Can you compare how you had to prepare for an audit before and then after using Arena?
Sure. Before we had Arena, it was typically paper binders, and you would go through and kind of do a pre-audit audit to review the binder to make sure everything was current, to make sure everything was there. So there was certainly a couple hours of preparation, depending on if it was a smaller audit or if it's FDA, a lot more than that. But we don't have to do that if everything's in the system and everything is current. Makes it much easier.
This?
Sure. So, before, as you can imagine, we have a complex system, so our binders are really big. And there are times we write, justification rationale, or we write a memo to file, or memo to the DHL binder. And when we do the review, like 8 months after the project or 1 year into the project, we don't know where that justification memo or what that memo was written for. We spend a lot of time thinking about how do you connect it. With an electronic system, it's all built in. You spend way less time in searching for that information, and if it is linked, it's much more straightforward.
Okay, thank you. Danielle, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, so switching to an electronic system seems like a big undertaking. How did the conversion go from paper-based to electronic?
Sure, I can take it. So, we have, it's been 2 years, so we have moved from paper-based to electronic system. It's depending upon how complex your paper-based system is, how many records do you have, you can easily get it done, within 3 to 6 months, or depending upon how complex you want to build the system, it could take longer than that. I think the question always, one of the things, with my experience of implementing multiple systems and going from paper-based to electronic system, the question always comes down to, hey, do we build our existing paper-based process into the system, or should we just go with what the system has to offer? And, as I implement more systems, I always share my 2 cents. Go with what the system has to offer. With regulations being so clear and all the electronic systems, have understood what the regulations is, and they've been really good in implementing changes and keeping up with the regulation changes. So the current systems, electronic systems, have the built-in process which is compliant to FDA and other regulations.
Okay, our transition at ORS, at Organ Recovery Systems, went very smoothly, probably because the system we had before was very inefficient. And we have a lot of remote employees and multiple sites, even though we're small. So before we had the electronic approvals, we were scanning and faxing documents around, trying to get signatures. So when we had the opportunity to do it all electronically, I think everyone was motivated. We all got on board, and it went very well.
Great. Okay. Could either of you provide some advice on design controls for outsourced prototype development? What's needed during early development phases?
Sorry, what was the question again?
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed the
I
question.
couldn't understand that.
Could you provide some advice on design controls for outsourced prototype development and what's needed during early development phases?
Sure. Chris, can I take it first, or do you mind?
Yep, go ahead.
Sure. This is my experience, how we do things here, some of the ways of doing it. So you could come up with an engineering drawing, right? You can have a basic version of what you think you want to build. You can release that with using there is something called change request, which is basically saying this is what I'm thinking of building, and you can share with your outsource partners and get an SOW and say that, hey, this is what I would like for you guys to build. What would it take? What does the statement of work look like? What is the success looks like, right? It's how many prototypes do you want? How many test iterations do you want to go through, and those kind of things.
All right. And for us, the prototyping process, initially it's going to happen earlier in the process, and in some cases before the official design control kicks in. If we're doing feasibility, that's outside of the design control system. If you're doing prototyping of more advanced models, once you've actually gotten into it, we just keep track of each of the drawings in the system. And as there's a change to the drawing, it just gets updated pretty easily in the electronic system, so that we've got a historical record of each of the different designs and what the prototypes represent.
Okay. If method of verification and validation is changed for a particular design, does it have to be included in design change control?
Let's see. Could you read that one again? I couldn't hear the first part of the sentence.
If method of verification and validation is changed for a particular design, does it have to be included in design change control?
Well, for us, it definitely would be. I'd have to know the exact context of the question, but yeah, if we made a change as it's described in our design verification plan, we would simply update the plan and include the rationale for why that was changing. Again, not a real big deal. And then the plan is still, all the different revisions of that plan are part of your design history file. So it's a fairly easy thing to document.
Yeah, I think Chris stated it right. If it is a change to your testing strategy, your verification or your test plan, you update that and you really control it through your change control process.
Yeah, you probably have a new revision of the verification or the validation test. Yeah. Okay.
Is there any way that we could have a quick look at what Arena looks like? And also, is Arena only for devices, or can it be adapted for other needs?
Okay, I'll take that one. Yes, you will be able to, you can see what Arena looks like. Just contact us at arenasolutions.com, and we'd be glad to show it to you. And then Arena is used for medical devices, but also high-tech, less regulated devices, and then more recently ITAR-regulated devices as well. So when you do meet with with the person from Arena for the demonstration, we can talk about what exactly your needs are, and then be able to answer your specific issues. Okay.
All right. I think that's all the questions that we have time for right now. Before we sign off, I just wanted to let you know that there will be a post-webinar survey at the end, and we would really appreciate it if you took the time to give your feedback. And this presentation will be emailed to everyone later today. I want to thank Anne, Chris, and Liz for their insights. And thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar from Medical Design and Outsourcing and Arena Solutions.